Welcome to Rules of Villainy Lorcana Podcast, where three new TCG comers discuss their opinions on Lorcana and journey to be the very best, like no other three ever were. I'm Villain Vince, joined by my two co-hosts, Villain Andy and Villain Brad, aka the Mayor. We're a new podcast here, and we're going to talk about how we're going to venture to be the best Illumineers in the game as new TCG players. This is all three of our first TCG. But who the hell are we? So for that, I'm going to kick it off to Andy to talk a little bit about his experience in TCGs and why Lorcana.
Thanks, Vince. I originally played like Pokemon when I was a kid. I guess I should say I collected it. I don't know that we actually knew how to play the game back then. We were kind of just, whoever put down the shinier card kind of won. I did play Magic the Gathering a little bit for one iteration. And then once I told my mom I needed all new cards in order to go back to the store to keep playing with my friends because it changed to a new year, she was like, "No, we're not doing that." And then I played a little bit of the Legends of Runeterra, the League of Legends based online card game. I made low plat in that, so I was not terrible. So I kind of enjoyed card games a little bit, and my wife loves Disney, and it showed up on our feed at the same time, and we got into it, and I'm really glad I have. I really enjoy the puzzle aspect nature of it, very competitive nature of it. I think it's a very well built game, and I look forward to being the very best.
Great. And Brad, the Mayor, as we like to call him.
I'll let you tell the story of the Mayor. But no, as far as Lorcana, it was something that came across my radar through my friends. They said a new Disney card game was coming out, and I was like, I'll get into it, I think it would be fun to collect the cards. I've never collected cards. I shouldn't say that. I did as a kid, some wrestling cards and some Pokemon cards, but like Andy, I never played the game before. And then I went to a local game store, and turns out I really enjoyed the game, and here I am, 4 sets deep, trying to improve every time, and I'm enjoying the heck out of it. What about you, Vince?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't really relate to the collecting because I don't collect anything. For those that are listening, I won't be able to see that my entire background is basically all Lego, so no, that's such a lie. But I think like Andy, I got into Pokemon because the craze, I was a 90s kid, super into collecting Pokemon. I never learned the game. Actually, I learned the game after learning Lorcana because somebody at one of the game stores we all play at, the three of us, was really into Pokemon and so taught me how to play it. So, 20 plus years later, I finally learned how to play Pokemon, this game that I collected at the time. I also collected a little bit of the original 90s version of Star Wars, the trading card game, because I'm super into Star Wars. But I was getting into board games a lot, and one of the YouTube channels that I follow was talking about this, upcoming game called Lorcana, and it was Disney. It was a new trading card game with Ravensburger, and I knew about Villainous, really enjoyed Villainous. And I was like, that sounds really, really interesting, and I was really excited about it. Went to Gen Con last year, and when the fire marshal is being called because there's such a line to get into to get product, I was like, I gotta get this game, and stood in line when it came out at retail, and then that first set spent way more money than I intended to, and I was like, well, now I gotta play this game, now I gotta learn how to play it. And we all, the three of us all met playing Lorcana, so none of it we are all new to this first TCG and stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about the purpose of the podcast, and feel free, Brad or Andy, just to join in and, talk a little bit about it. But, I think we all want to be really competitive in this. This is our first TCG. So we've gone to competitive events. We've all participated in the Set 3 championship. We have gone to the DLCs. That's the, I'm going to say it wrong. I think it's the Disney Lorcana Challenge. That's what, right? That's what it stands for. Great. And so you two went to both Atlanta and Chicago. I only went to Chicago. But do you want either one of you want to talk a little bit more about what we want to do here as a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the mayor. I don't know that any of us can, but um, I I I find a lot of joy in uh, sort of figuring out that puzzle that is trying to be better and more competitive at this game. I think a newer TCG has a very unique experience where the barrier to be sort of great at the game is much lower. um the common saying of playing to your outs, playing to your opponent's outs. Right now there are, what, 4 times 204 cards, 4 sets. That's, there's less than 1,000 outs, so to speak, that your opponent has, obviously narrowed down by ink color and things. But it it makes it a lot easier for you to be really good at it, to figure out the puzzle, which will set you up, I think, for the future when there are maybe 10,000 cards in the game and you have to pick the very best 60 cards to put in your deck. So um, that puzzle to me is really fun, and I want to share sort of that the knowledge I go along the way, somewhat to help encourage others maybe to find the same kind of fun in this game that I do from these sorts of competitive.
Yeah. Well, Andy, you brought up a lot of things about whether or not 60 cards. We got a lot to talk about there. 60 outs. And I also think, like, just for the math folks out there who are probably screaming, I think there's 816 cards, right? That would be 4 times 204. So there are
Sure.
816 cards. If I'm wrong, somebody's gonna let us know.
It's still less than 1,000, but yeah,
it is still less. He was technically right, and yes. That's the best kind of correct. Or anyway, on to you, Brad.
Yeah, to second Andy's opinion there is I tread the line of competitive and just keeping it fun, as well as the night that we host, Vince, where we promote people coming to learn the game and playing fun experimental decks and such, because the competitive side of it for me takes a lot out of me sometimes, especially in the long days of Chicago where we have 9 rounds of Swiss, where it's just like by round 6, I'm like, I'm kind of done overthinking, and I'm a chronic overthinker on some of and all aspects of life, let alone this game. But what I really like about the game, and what Andy touched on, is that it's new. We're only 4 sets in, about to be 5, but it's a really easy learning curve. And as somebody who's been told for years that I would love Magic the Gathering, and have friends who've been telling me, I'll give you my Magic card so you play Magic, and it seems a lot. I've watched people play Magic, and I feel like I could pick it up if I wanted to, but this seems so much easier to pick up. And the fact that it's got the Disney backing and all the familiar characters that we all grew up with, and then the younger generation is still growing up with or becoming accustomed to, that it makes it more appealing and so much more fun. And that's what I like to take a break from the competitive side once in a while and just play an all Robin Hood deck or an all Princess deck and see what I can do with it, and find the cards that some people would call jank and have fun with them, because there's so many cards to play with, but when you're playing strictly competitive, you never see those cards. So I do like the game for those reasons, in different directions of just having fun, playing competitively, and doing what we can with it.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you're like, okay, why should I listen to these folks? Well, I don't know. I can't give you that answer, except to say, like, join us on this journey as we're trying to figure out how to be good. Like, if you're at a league and you want to get better, we're all going to try to get better at this together. And if you just want to have fun, we're going to talk about ways to have fun, so that, if there's somebody that's coming to your league every night that you feel like, I want to beat this person, like, that's going to give me the best accomplishment, join us, and, like, we'll talk about that and stuff. So always feel free to, write comments to us, and, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I think that's what you're supposed to do on the whole YouTube here, and hit that bell icon to get notified for our next podcast. With that, we're going to move on into our next section here, which is rapid fire news. So we're going to talk about some other things here for news items, and we're going to quickly discuss them. to try to get through some of the big kind of key news points. But we do have something hot off the press tonight. This just happened right before we hit record, which is that Disney Lorcana came out and said, attention, US and Canada Disney Lorcana players and retailers looking to participate in the Ursula's Return Set Championship this weekend. Due to shipping delays running into the US holiday weekend, of course, this is running into July 3rd, Ursula's Return Set Championship kits in Canada and certain areas of the US will not make it to the stores for the start of the Set Championship season this weekend. As we all know, we're about to head into, or maybe you don't know, we're about to head into the set for Ursula's Return Set Championship, and it looks like there's some shipping delays. This does not affect the European stores, but looks like it is going to affect North American stores, particularly Canada and the United States. So what do we think of this? Like, I don't know.
The event that Brad and I were going to in Paris is not affected, so we'll probably be okay. Yeah. As I said, I think this is kind of big. I mean, I think Vince and I were planning on traveling over 2 hours to what is essentially the only store within, I don't know, 200 miles that is doing a set championship on the 7th. And while we'll still have fun and, we'll still do our best, everything, it would stink to have to like turn around and come back another weekend just to pick up our prizes, but I guess it is what it is, right? Like,
Yeah, it's a huge bummer. I'm not playing in any this weekend. I've had prior commitments that I need to attend, but seeing that news right before we started was like, dang, right before we record our first podcast, this bummer news comes out and we're going to have to talk about it. I wanted to be excited about something, which we have plenty more to do, but no, I feel bad for our local stores. One of the big ones here in the area, which we're blessed with so many, is the first one that doing it here in St. Louis. And I'm curious whether or not they got the product for it. I hope they did.
Yeah, I mean, I am too. Listen, I am a big lover of the game. I love Ravensburger, but this does seem like perhaps something that like they could have foreseen was going to happen. That like there was going to be a shipping delay before the 4th of July weekend, and maybe they should have planned maybe a little bit further ahead to send out this product to the stores.
yeah.
But I mean,
What is
I
the
don't know.
harm in that too, right? Like, I they're not really mitigating anything by having these stores receive this product like the last minute before the events start, right? That doesn't. If the store is gonna be shady and keep the product and just sell it or whatever, I would imagine they're not dumb enough to sell it like 3 weeks before the events even start, right? Like that's, a surefire way to get yourself in trouble. So shipping these out at a sort of later, the last moment kind of deal is definitely a question mark.
Yeah.
Not sure the logistics behind it.
Yeah, it's like I know, which we're not going to talk about today, but perhaps maybe we'll talk about in the future episodes. Is some of like the logistics and printing quality of sets, delays and getting product out, and what we think of product being on shelves, which is certainly like I will just say has gotten better since set one where you couldn't find it anywhere
For sure.
to walking into a Target tonight and seeing like 6 Strohs and 6 Ursula's Quest sitting on the shelves. So clearly they've started to figure that out and get enough product out to meet the demand that's out there and have some for folks to still go get that are getting into the game. But yeah, it does seem like a miss to not have had some a little bit pre-planning up front with this. But again, it could not be a Ravensburger problem. It could be a shipping problem with whoever the carriers that they're doing. So I don't want to put 100% blame, but it is certainly a bummer for those that are anticipating to go out and not actually being able to get, the product that they have and having to go back to stores that maybe they don't live close to. And That is a bummer.
Yeah, that is to say, you should still definitely go support your local store, even if they don't have the product. You, they're going to get it eventually. You go back, you'll get your prize. The satisfaction of winning is honestly worth more than the card will ever be. I can assure you.
Satisfaction is nice. Yes, I agree. Support your local game stores. All three of us do. It's how we met. Which I'll probably say a billion times. So next up, we've got our first thoughts on Shimmering Skies. So it's been about 2.5 weeks or so since they released the Lorecast. For first introducing Shimmering Skies, we've now gotten a decent amount of cards out. I mean, I shouldn't say decent. We've probably gotten maybe like 30, 40 cards.
Yeah, 20, I was about to say about 25 or 30. Yeah.
What are our first thoughts on this?
There's a few that stood out. Of course, I'm always a big fan of Scar. Honestly, I don't know if he's workable into any Emerald decks at the moment. I would certainly try to do it. I know a lot of people are talking about the Maui song. You're welcome. Seems to be in the card in Emerald that everybody's excited about. But big Wreck-It Ralph presence. This is kind of fun to finally see him. I know we got one card of him before. I think in set 2, the Pick a Fight. That's never really seen play, but I considered it this past not too long ago for the villain of the week, which we'll talk about at some point tonight. But yeah, it seems fun. Just like the Madrigals were in set 3, we got a lot of Wreck-It Ralph looking to be the starter deck sets with the racers, and I'm curious to see how those synergize.
Yeah, I hate to be the group's pessimist here. I imagine racers will have a bunch of abilities that do nothing. They'll go against like candy goblins or something, and there won't be any of those in the game, like Rafiki and the hyenas. Or I haven't been too impressed with the cards, but I've also been just mostly focusing on trying to figure out set championships and win and be able to win that before I have to worry about adding any of these new cards in. I did see that new Robin Hood, that quest for like 40,000 lore or some obscene amount.
Divided by 10,000, but close, yeah.
Yeah, but it was still quite the card. I definitely think Ravensburger has an affinity towards the lore gain, the questing, as opposed to like the control type cards. We see a lot of big cards that just make your eyes light up like a boo with the gemstones in them, and it always gets my hopes up to see these cards do great, but I don't know. Cautiously optimistic.
Sure. I'm the kind of player who like I like the reveals. I like looking at the cards, but until I have them in hand and trying to make combos work in a deck, I don't really know how good they are. I rely on people like you guys who are much better players than me, and the content creators we pay attention to talking about what this card can do, and they'll be like, oh, that's something I never thought of. Which we just watched Spessy in the last couple days play that the super rare Bell, and that the synergy with Smee, who I play all the time in my blue steel, is like, that's really cool. I never would have thought about doing that. I've never seen that card played until a few days ago. And so all these cards coming out, they have, I'm sure some of them have cool things that I don't know about yet, because there's just 200 cards a set, right? And then it'll be halfway through set 5 before I realize that card's really cool. I'm going to try it out now.
Yeah, but I think that's the fun of the game, right? Is to see a card, which honestly is the villain of the week, right? A card that came out in set 2, and didn't really see the play and become as contentious until set 4. And so being able to see these new cards come into play and thinking about it, I think there's some fun decks to be made. Like, I think the new racer tag and being able to build a racer deck Will it be good? I don't know. I'm probably not as optimistic that it's going to be a meta level deck, but I think it could be a fun deck. I think the thing I will say about Lorcana and the cards that revealed so far is that the ability to do removal, so when I talk about removal, think about like Be Prepared and Brawl is really expensive in the game. What is the card, the Tug of War that was I think came out today or yesterday, where it's what is it? Is it a
The
four
five
cost?
cost,
Five cost.
uninkable action. Not even a song. That's not. It's an inkable. I thought it was
is
uninkable.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
It's inkable. It's 1 to all characters or 3 to all evasive characters. Or no, 1 to all non-evasives or 3 to all evasives. Very
Right.
expensive.
Yeah.
Very expensive. And I feel like it's one of those cards that reminds me a lot of like Avalanche in the current set, which is a 4 cost uninkable, does 1 damage to everything, and will take out a location. And you're like, okay, well, is this card good? Or like, does it have a home? And like, I think the answer there is that probably not. Like, I mean, I don't see a lot of folks running Avalanche today, and if they are, they're running maybe 1 copy of it, not a staple of 4. And I could see Tug of War being in that same kind of camp. You're definitely not going to run 4. You might not even run 1, but if you're going to run it, maybe you do run 1. But I think it kind of depends on how big evasives are, or how big that spray of damage is. But it's just really, really expensive. And I think in some ways it's a little bit of the detriment of the game, right? Is like I wish there was a little bit more board interaction or abilities to get out of tougher situations. But I think it's still too early, and I'll be interested to see how the set develops.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right there, Vince, that like it is way too expensive. And if you look at something like Avalanche, the only reason we know that card exists is because of 1, our villain of the week, Bucky, and because Queen's Castle exists is the other option.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
And-
it does.
And also largely because the Queen's Castle has such a massive gap between it and the next best. I mean, the next best location is just McDuck Manor, and it's really just like a big giant house, right? Like it's just it doesn't have that amazing ability like Castle does. And so you're only thinking of Avalanche because it sort of has double meaning in the meta currently. Bucky and a location. If locations in general were more prevalent, if there were more castles, more McDucks, more other locations that were that good, you'd be playing better location tech cards in your deck. And if 1-drop ward characters or getting 1 damage in AoE like that was more valuable, you'd again be playing better cards like a Tinkerbell that is, considerably better to spread that damage down if you need it. And so I think part of me thinks that some of these cards were developed for limited because you were talking about like the racer decks or, and these maybe not meta decks. In my opinion, the time that these sorts of interactions have the most value and I get the most fun out of them is in these sort of limited, non-competitive constructed formats, like the event that you hosted where we did starter decks. Heroes and Madrigals were the focus of that, mainly because they were in the starter decks, but you got to see those synergies shine a lot more. And, something like dealing 1 to all non-evasives or 3 to evasives. I think I made the joke when we talked about this when it launched in the Discord that let me guess, there's going to be 1 evasive in this set, and it's going to make this card completely worthless for limited. But at the same time, maybe that's where this card shines, is that maybe this set has a big racer synergy that turns them all evasive or something like that. Something like the RLS Legacy that makes your characters evasive. Maybe it's instead of ward and evasive, right? That's what they get from the legacy. Maybe there's a King Candy's Castle that gives you just evasive, and it's cheaper to move there, right? It won't, and then that card will only show up in the meta if other decks are playing evasive, like you said. And everyone will hate playing that card in their deck.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point about the limited format, and I mean, this is ultimately like why I think it is hard for me to wrap my head around saying a card is good or bad, because I think context matters. Like, there are going to be cards that are going to be really, and we're going to give you our honest opinions, and we could totally be wrong about these. But there are going to be cards that I think are going to be better in the draft format or sealed format than in a constructed deck and a constructed format to be competitive. And so I think for primarily, like, when I'm talking about, tug of war, I think, right, exactly, that's card is not good in a constructed deck. It could be wrong. It totally could be our next lucky dime. I don't think it will be, but it totally could be. But I will say, I think you're right about the limited format, which kind of goes right into our next topic here, talking about the DLCs, is that I was absolutely destroyed in Chicago by a 12-year-old girl playing this hero synergy princess deck. I mean, she just wrecked me. I mean, kudos to her, honestly. It just shows you what a great game it was and what a great experience that was. And I was really happy that she won that in that sealed event. So this weekend we have, I think, Bochum in Germany, and in 2 weekends from now is Fort Worth. So we can talk a little bit about that, and we can talk a little bit about Atlanta and Chicago.
Are you still going to Dallas, Fort Worth, Vince?
So I got tickets also for Toronto, and I think it's a sign to renew my passport to go to Toronto and pass on Fort Worth. I have the application over here to renew my passport. I'm probably just gonna go to Chicago to the embassy there, and or not the whatever consul that is, and get my passport renewed.
Isn't it? It's Canada. You just walk across the border, right? They don't. It's just it's like walking across the street to go to Taco Bell or something. You just do it.
Quick tangent. I used to travel a lot for my last job, and I would always fly into Canada. But one time I flew into Buffalo, and I had to cross the border in my car, and I took the wrong lane. I didn't know what I was doing. I took the lane that the semi trucks would take, and I pulled up to the lane, and the window is way up here. Where I'm like, what do I do here? And he's like, what are you trying to do? I'm like, I'm trying to get to Toronto, wherever I was going. Mississauga, I think. And the guy just looked at me and goes, just go on through. So that to Andy's point, it was like, okay, I don't think I did this right, but I'm definitely going to make sure I do it right on the way back.
And that was how the mayor made $150,000 smuggling illicit items into Canada.
I wish my last job.
No. You looked over to his partner.
I felt so silly
every time.
Yeah. He looked at me like I was silly, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And
I am sure that has happened. It probably happens once a day, I bet.
Yeah.
As many people go across that border. But no, the other reason why I was thinking about Toronto too is because while set 5 I don't think is legal, because it won't be legal because it's not yet for big box release, but set 5 will be out, and the new promo there will be that is it Christoph, right?
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
With the fireworks behind it, that's the promo they're giving
instead of the Flotsam and Jetsam. Yeah.
Well, that's nice.
So I was like, maybe I want to do that one instead of.
I thought the whole year was going to be the Flotsam and Jetsam, and then next year they would change the promo.
No, so the Flotsam, so it's there are promos that they have per each set, and then there are the challenge promos.
Challenge promo. So that's the challenge.
So the challenge promos are not going to change until they do the next one. So that's gotcha. the Dragonfire, the Cinderella, the Rapunzel, and all the other pricing for if you're, one day we'll be holding that golden Mickey.
Right.
You laugh, Brad, but that's the purpose of this podcast. It's
Exactly.
for us
We'll
to get
see.
that golden Mickey.
I believe in
whatever golden card comes next. at least get an invite to
Nationals.
Continentals or Nationals. Or
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, so that they do change the promos because if you remember, like early on, so when Gen Con first came, they gave out the Mickey Musketeer and had the Gen Con logo on it, and so they were doing that for all these events. They were giving a promo and they printed it to that particular event, and so it had the event logo at the bottom. And then they transitioned away from that to having the promo logo that we know of that you get, from the OP kits and everything else. And they print those for just that set, and you can get them at multiple different conventions wherever Ravensburger's at. So a lot of people are going to get them at the DLCs, but if you're going to Origins, which was I think this last week in Columbus, Ohio, or Gen Con, there's going to be opportunities to get these other promos that are out there, that Flotsam and Jetsam.
That's great.
Yeah.
Making me feel like I need to go to Seattle now.
Definitely going to Seattle.
We'll see. I'm pretty strapped in my Lorcana budget now, but it's tempting knowing there's a new promo there.
Yeah, I definitely had some thoughts, like in comparison from Chicago to Atlanta. Obviously, everyone knows that Chicago ran considerably smoother when it comes to melee and things like that. Maybe it's nitpicking, but I feel like Chicago did considerably worse when it comes to food. And like in Atlanta,
You didn't like the wet turkey sandwich?
wet
The
turkey,
best hot dog on the planet?
the best. Yeah, it was not great. $14 for a cafeteria hamburger. Whereas in Atlanta, we had basically two different food courts that we had the opportunity to go to.
But that's based on location, right? Like where it was actually hosted.
Okay, we'll pick a better location, Ravensburger. I guess
that's
my
what I was
main
getting
point.
to. Was I didn't know whether or not food is actually included in the package of going to the event, and so maybe this was the best the hotel could do. But I agree with you. It was not great. I was not thrilled about it. Especially in comparison to Atlanta, where we had so many options. But at the same time, part of me is like, I don't know that I went there expecting them to feed me though either. So,
you went there knowing that they would have a 1 hour break for lunch, right? The opportunity for you to get your options for food were the restaurant bar, which I think wasn't open yet. It was that tiny little, convenience store in the hotel. It was the hotel cafeteria food they brought out. Or it was like some sort of insane Uber maneuver, or like leaving your $40 parking spot and going back in and paying another $40 to drive to the nearest place. Whereas even if they hadn't had the food court in the convention center in Atlanta where they chose it, the convention center was directly across the street, walking distance from a stadium, and they opened that food court at the stadium. To be fair, we probably lucked out because of the anime convention or cosplay convention that was going on. That's probably why they opened it up.
Because you had Momo.
Right. That's clearly why they opened up that place. But I think definitely that's something that Ravensburger should consider. If they're going to give us a lunch break like that, then they should, maybe have a few more options for food.
Well, so one is like I will say. If we're talking about food complaints, I think we're way on the bottom of the list of things that went wrong in Chicago. But with that being said, also understanding too that that's PPG who set that up, right? And so,
very true.
Via Ravensburger. I also suspect, having done some of this in the past, when you do reserve hotels, they get the first right of refusal when it comes to food purchases. And so I think they probably like had to do that, because I was thinking like, what's the other option here? And I think the only other option is like, given where we were, is for them to like hire food trucks to come,
Hmm.
which would have been
Yeah.
nice. But
Pick a
I like,
venue closer to food, right?
yeah, but I mean, I think it was fine. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll say I
It's
really enjoyed
nitpicking,
the
like I said.
ability.
It's kind of
Yeah.
I enjoyed the ability of being able to like stay in that hotel, just go
Walk
down to
downstairs and play.
walk downstairs. They had the hotel room block. I mean, you didn't stay at the hotel Andy, so I don't know how your experience was. I think it was money well spent on our end.
Yeah, I have no other than the food that Andy brought up, which again very minor. I have no complaints about Chicago, especially in comparison to Atlanta. Atlanta was very much like a let's see how this goes, but in their defense, Atlanta also had twice as many people too. So there was a lot more going on, but and by all comparisons, Chicago was like went swimmingly. The fact that they listened to everybody about the prize tickets, so we all got prize tickets for being in the main event, and then nothing that, to my knowledge, went wrong with Melee. So everything was firing off as it should. All the rounds were going up as they should, and I other than the food had no complaints. I thought it was great. Other than not making the top 64, but. But I
a
should have
skill
played
issue.
better. Yeah, it's a skill issue for sure. It is. It very much is. I know you're messing with me, but it's true.
I do think that another improvement that they could make would be like we there that are competing and playing, we're fans of this too. I wish there was a way to watch the streams in the event, right? Like especially day 2, put projectors up all over the walls and like stream the event. It would also require them though to like stream the events in a more real time, right? That was the other complaint is I was tired of like seeing our buddy come up and tell us how he did before I could watch and see how he did on the live stream myself kind of thing. It's like what 2-3 hours behind because they record the match entirely. They do all the editing. I understand the production value that goes into it, but those are sort of the dreams for the future of DLCs is to be able to, make it as much of a competitor event as it is a spectator event as well. As the attendee, you're not just doing side events; you can also watch like the live events.
The one other thing I would say. Oh, sorry, Vince.
No, go on.
It's very quick. Is that I was extremely bummed in Chicago that Ryan Miller wasn't there like he was in Atlanta because I missed my opportunity to meet him, and I was expecting that him or Steve Warner. To those unaware, if you're listening to this, you probably are aware, the co-creators of the game. But I wasn't prepared in Atlanta to meet him and have something signed. So I was like, Chicago, I'm going to bring, my Enchanted Arthur or something that I know that he'll really like. And then he wasn't there, and I'm like, dang it. So I would like to see, I know they have their own lives and everything too, but their presence, I think his presence at Atlanta was thrilling to me, and I wish I would have got to at least say hi.
Yeah. I agree that it was a bummer not to meet him, but it was great that I got to meet Rochelle and play Rochelle. That was fun. I really enjoyed playing those little games with Rochelle, and who, again, folks may not know, but she's the community manager, I think, for North America for Lorcana. Phenomenal. Like, it was great to play her. Was a better player. Like, I was playing your deck, Brad. And
Yep.
I'm glad I did, because I was angling for those getting 3 promos versus just the 1 for participating. But I also like. I think you mentioned there was half the people from Atlanta and Chicago, so that certainly made it a little bit better. I think the venue space seemed a little bit better too, because of the tables. When I was looking at the pictures, really kind of compact, and these were nice, like a banquet sized tables, so everybody had enough space. Like, I never felt super crowded in the venue, and also there wasn't another venue going on across the Atlantic in Europe at the exact same time that had 2,000 people. And at the same time, so you didn't have like basically 4,000 people trying to use Melee at the exact same time. I am very interested because I don't know if either of you know this, but the way they're doing it in Europe, because they have less events than we do here in North America, is they are doing 2,000 person events for both of them because of the limitation of the venue. They're doing 1,000 on Friday and then 1,000 on Saturday, and then doing the cut on Sunday.
I think they're doing the same thing in Dallas. I heard somebody talk about Dallas or Toronto, wherever the next one with 2,000 is. They were doing a day 1 and a day 2. Is that still accurate?
I think I heard the same thing. And I think on Thursday night, I think they were talking about Bochum. I think they may have just been
Oh, okay.
mistaken. I haven't heard it announced for any North American based events.
Okay.
But yeah, I heard the same thing, Vince, about the venue restriction. And there's like a big debate on whether you should play Friday or Saturday. And I think it's a cool concept. I think, if anything, I really like that Ravensburger is willing to experiment, even if this isn't that crazy of an experiment or whatever. But you got the 2-game format, you got, the 2-day format now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about the experimentation, and listening to folks in complaints about 3-game versus 2-game. Now, you both have done 2 kind of big events with the 2-game format. I've done 1 and a bunch of smaller ones. I'm a big proponent of the 2-game format, but I'm curious, what are your opinions on that as well?
I like the 2-game. I think it goes by faster. It makes the game feel faster, and then you're not reliant on the die roll. Because in most instances, the die roll is the indicator of you have the best shot at winning the series, right? You go first the first game, and you go first probably it has to be the last game because you would lose the second one, right? So you have 2 shots at going first, and that's such a big advantage that I think splitting it up to just 2 games, each player going first, and then making the point system what it is. It's still you still have that chance of winning on the draw, and it certainly happens, and it makes it feel faster, and I enjoy that. What about you, Andy?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't know that I enjoy the 2-game format the most. Like, I do love a best of 3 format, the sort of finality of actually winning or losing the series, and it certainly adds a interesting aspect to the game. But overall, I think it adds more net positives. I think the fairness, quote unquote, that you said of the dice roll, taking that out of it. Again, with the experimentation, I love that they listened to what we said and what their experiment brought them about adding the additional points on there, going from that. Was it before it was 1 point per game and then an additional point if you went the 2-0, so you get either 1 or 3 points. So it's essentially exactly like just tying in a best of 3 format. And now they got that 7 point versus 3 or whatever. I love that they did that. The time, I love that it shortens the time of these events. I go to a set championship that is 32 people. It's going to be almost 2 hours shorter than that same set championship that was done in a 3-game format. I think all of them are being done in 2-game formats this time around. So but it does, I think, add a very interesting dynamic to playing 2-game format all the way to top cut, and then having to go to a best of 3 format. Your deck sort of now has to be multifaceted, and it has to be good enough to do both, right?
Yeah, I do think there is some flexibility there, right? I will say, I think one of the things, the reason why I really love the 2-game format is, yes, it does, reduce the amount of time at the tournament, but it does allow you to play decks that I think you would be unlikely to play in a 3-game form. I'm not sure that you would want to go into a tournament playing red blue in a 3-game tournament where you're almost certainly going to go to time, because I ran into time. I played in Chicago, my Ruby Amethyst deck against 2, red blue decks. And, it's like taking like 15-minute turns of like popsicle draw and like, it's fun to watch that game play out. But at the same time, like it resulted actually in one of my opponents who should have won running out of time, and we went to end a game match, and like he just couldn't get the win in that time frame, and so took the match. I will say the thing I'm not a fan of is the bonus point. I don't love the bonus point. I see why it's there. I get it. But I think the bonus point is a little overweighted for the outcome of the game. Like, it's like, I think if you're going to give the bonus point, like you should play like the extra game, right? And now you're back to square one. But I mean, I don't feel that strongly with it because I don't think it would ultimately matter all that much unless you're playing a lot of rounds, which I think kind of segues right into our next topic is like, especially in these DLCs, do we think there should be more Swiss rounds before you go to this, what is it, 64 top cut in Chicago? I think, yeah, it was 64 in Atlanta as well, right?
It was 128 in Atlanta, right? Or 128.
No, I think they just expanded
They expanded the pricing.
The pricing,
right?
Yep.
Yeah, as someone who came into this as mostly a fan, I get, not a TCG veteran, obviously. I thought, oh, top 64 cut, that's awesome. That means I get to watch an entire March Madness worth of the best Lorcana players at each of these events, and that'll be so great. As you heard from my nitpicking and pet peeve before, or room for improvement, I didn't get to watch all of those matches. They only broadcast so many of them, and they didn't do with those the top 64 what I thought they would do, the spectacle that they would make it. And so I do understand the argument that is made by these TCG veterans that say more Swiss games narrows the field down to a smaller top cut, which gives you a much higher quality of games and higher skill of players that have made it to day two, essentially. Or I sort of see it both ways. I think Disney's and Ravensburger is probably going to stick with the larger top cut, and I would imagine they're going to move towards a bigger spectacle of that top 64.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think they can have their like kind of cake and eat it a little bit. Like, add probably more Swiss rounds, like but still do a larger top cut. I don't know. Like, I think the thing is, the one thing I really do wish, having played in Chicago is I do wish there was more penalties. Penalties is maybe a little harsh for opting not to play the game. Like the whole objective is to go to the game and play, but then you get folks that go basically, 2-0 for the first 5 rounds, and you've got 9 rounds of Swiss. They can now say the last 4 rounds they're not going to play. And like, I mean, I'm not knocking that. Like, they're good players, but I think we should be encouraging folks to sit down and play the game and not so much gaming the system to sit out those 4 rounds and not play. Like, we should encourage folks to play. And, that's why I really give a lot of kudos to the players that could do that don't for that.
Is there any kind of is it? Sorry, I didn't thought I had a moment there. Is there any kind of incentive to keep them playing? Because like mathematically, right? But the seeding is just I guess if you wanted to play for that first place, you're going to play the person who just squeaked in at 64. But I don't know that the power of that matchup is really there. Like there's not a big variance, and as opposed to like March Madness, like Andy described earlier, where the first seed is playing the 16th seed, where there's a wide gap in that skill level there, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that there's any incentive to actually keep playing and get the higher seed. And I think we saw in Atlanta, the top seed after Swiss was eliminated the first round, right?
It's the dice roll though.
Oh yeah, because they're doing best of 3.
Right, so you get the free dice roll when you are a higher seed.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, that's rapid fire news. not super rapid fire, but hopefully you enjoyed those opinions. We're going to move on to Villain of the Week. So in this segment, we're going to talk about a card that is the villain in the meta today. So it may not be a villain card per se, but it is the villain that you see at the table in front of you. And this week should have no introduction because you've heard it on pretty much every podcast around and on Twitter and in Discords, is Bucky is our villain of the week. I will just say that I've long hated Bucky, and I blame an individual that plays at our store. That individual will know exactly who I'm talking about if they ever listen to this podcast. I adore them. I'm just gonna say that I love them. But they've been playing Bucky since set 2 and trying to make this card work, and it hasn't always worked, but every time I've sat across from them play, it just driven me crazy, this card. And now that it is made it into the meta, it is like my enemy. This I can't even say it. I don't know where we I don't, unless we're gonna get that explicit rating for podcasts. I hate this
Everybody
card.
knows how you feel about Bucky. A lot of people feel the same way. It's one of those cards where in the previous sets I did enjoy playing discard, but I never felt good playing Bucky on 2 because I wasn't really flooding the boards with Floodborns. You know, I liked the 2-cost Flynn on turn 2 for that lore and that punishment for challenging him to make you discard. And so I never really focused on the Floodborn discard aspect of it until they introduced Diablo, the other part of that Bucky package that's been just killing the meta since set 4, where when he's on the board and you get to draw from every discard, or any time that you draw or the opponent draws, then while he's exerted, the player with, I've said that incredibly bad, but the Bucky Diablo package is just absolutely insane and made Bucky the most feared card in the game right now. And that's why in Chicago and probably in the set champion, since I'm going to continue to stay teched against it with my blue steel deck, just to try to get to 5 ink quickly and grab my swords to get him off the board, because he is not fun.
Grab your swords, Brad. That's interesting. You don't have a different tech option for Bucky that
I do.
you wanted to
I do
tell
like
to the viewers here, the listeners.
it has worked. It's not the best card for it because you're trying to ramp your card, ramp your ink up, but I do really like Triton's Decree. If you
Triton's Decree.
What does
that card do, Brad?
What does that card do? Like, remind us.
Is that a real card?
It is a real card. It's a 1-cost uninkable action where the opponent picks a player and adds 2 damage to them. It's 1 or 2 damage. I think it's 2. And the point of Triton's Decree, I think I only ever ran 2 of them, was that on turn
too many.
Yeah. And it was, like I said, I like to experiment with little ideas, and it would be a good card for Bucky. Will come out on 2, and then if I could fire the cannons at Diablo or something to get him off the board, because Bucky is protected by something they call ward. Again, anybody listening to this probably knows what ward is, but for those who don't, you can't target somebody with ward. So that's why Bucky is so villainous. Triton's Decree gets around that because it makes the player who played Bucky pick that character, and if he's the only person on the board on turn 2, you could potentially get rid of him right away, especially on the draw. Like if you're on the draw and you have a way to get rid of their other character, which is a fire the cannons, in that particular instance, because you got 2 ink, so 1 cost fire the cannons, 1 cost Triton's Decree, you could get rid of that Bucky right away. It turns out that Bucky's not really, I mean, he is a problem, but I've never run into an issue where, say, other players, our friend who made the top 32, he got triple Buckied in the top 32, and that's what cost him the game. Where I would see Bucky from time and time again, but I was able to ramp quick enough to just bring out Big Tink or bring out swords or something that would deal with a Bucky maybe a turn later. But in the early game, I thought, hey, Triton's Decree is not a bad option. So Andy likes to give me a lot of crap about it. It doesn't always work, and I dare I say it rarely was a solution, but it did work at times. And as you even agreed to at our limited event the other day, it's not a bad option in a scenario like that. But it's not the best card to have in a super competitive deck. I will concede to that.
In a limited format, it's an okay card. But it's funny that you say that because I'm pretty sure your last list that had Triton's Decree in it ran 1 Triton's Decree and 2 Fire the Cannons.
I don't think so.
That seem about right?
I mean, I can look that up, but
Because I'm just saying, I ran the math. With 1 Triton's Decree and 2 Fire the Cannons, you have a less than 9% chance of getting both cards in your opening hand, assuming you've mulliganed a full 7 cards, okay? So your other scenario, though, is that your opponent, who has 8 1-drops and 4 Buckies, somehow draws at least one of his 4 Buckies, as well as 0 of their 8 1-drops. So they obviously pass on turn 1, then play Bucky on turn 2, and then big poop eat and grin Brad the Mayor over here has got his Triton's Decree, slaps that down. That happens less than a 7% chance, according to hypergeometric math. All right. Just
I wanna jump in and defend real quickly that I don't like running a one of anything. So if I ever ran or when I ran Triton's Decree, I would assume that it was always at least 2. But regardless, it's not in my deck right now, so we can move on from it.
Well, but I mean, like, here's the thing about going back to, I think, like, Bucky, right? The reason why this card has been a problem for me and why I dislike it is because there's no incentive for the player to have any interaction with it. It is a worded character that's ability triggers when you play a Floodborn, and now the key components that are in that deck that make that work is the Floodborn Diablo, which you can if you've got the 1-drop Diablo, you could then play on turn 2 Bucky, discard a card, shift your Diablo, force your opponent to discard a card. Turn 3, you've got the Aladdin Floodborn, and then turn 4, you've got the Jafar Floodborn. Now, like, how often is a player going to get that perfect scenario off? Probably not very often, to be honest. But like, if that happens, like, you might as well just like hand them the game, because there's like, it is a full, like, not even exerting to get the value out, right? Like, that's the problem I have with Ward on this 2-drop character. It is so. It is just fundamentally, Andy will love this, an unfair card in the game.
And it's wild that his ability can trigger on the turn that you play him, because you can shift that Diablo by discarding an action. Like, usually you have to wait a turn to get any kind of effect from a card like that. And no, Bucky comes out for the cost of your ink, and Diablo comes out for the cost of a shift and discarding an action card. And then suddenly you're off to the races and discarding your opponent. And like you said, Aladdin, Jafar, Flynn, Beast, Robin Hood, everything after that is just a Floodborn. So you're constantly losing your hand. So decks like mine and Andy's are reliant on our blue draw, ramping up to get rid of what's on the board, and 2, keep up with that discard by drawing with our Hyrams and everything else that we have to outbeat or outpace that discard.
Right. But I mean, just even think about Diablo, right? Its ability to gain you an extra card requires you to exert it, to make it vulnerable. And like, that is where, like, I think the key problem with Bucky is like, I wouldn't have so much of a problem with Bucky being warded if you had to turn him sideways in order for his ability to trigger. So you still get the ability to do the discard with him if you want, but then you're putting him at risk. And there are ways you could get around that. You could play bodyguard characters and stuff. I think it forces your opponent to build better decks if they want to go this heavy discard route, but also gives you as the opponent to play versus like not having any options and just discarding every card in your hand and being a spectator in your own game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do we think? Do we think Bucky First bannable character in Lorcana.
I don't know about that. I've when it comes to the bannable conversation, I'm always on the side of the fence of like there's still ways around it, but and what the problem is that you can't do it in every color, right? You have to limit yourself to the steel, basically. Steel song, blue steel. I honestly have not had any problems with Bucky. It's anytime that I did, it'd be misplays or I'd brick my hand. In Chicago, I bricked my hand twice against Bucky with 3 grab your swords and like another uninkable off the mulligan, to where I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't eat quick enough to keep up with the discard, and uh, I'm not one to jump on the bandwagon. I think there are other cards that are ahead of him in the conversation, but I just always try to build around it instead of say, oh, that card needs to go away, I don't like it. But I'd see the argument for sure. So I'm on the fence of no, don't ban Bucky, just banish him. Just do what you can to get him off the board. What about you, Andy?
Yeah. Like Vince said earlier, I think in our conversation a while back, Bucky isn't or wasn't the problem really before. Problem is, like you said, is that before the cheapest Floodborn was 4 cost with that snake. So again, like Brad was saying, he didn't really play Bucky on 2. Bucky was not as consequential. Not only do they make 3 cost Floodborn characters with this new set, they made 0 cost Floodborn characters with this set, essentially. Um, and I actually ran the math on it, Vince. It's something like 97% of the time your opponent will have Bucky on 2, Diablo on 3, Diablo on 4, Diablo on 5, and then just to really nail it home, a Flynn Rider on 6. So that's pretty much the line Green Steel gets every single time, or at least that's what that's what the math tells you. So. But I don't know that it needs to be banned. I'm kind of with Brad on this, that I want to let things play out more. I just think they need more answers to Bucky, or the annoyance of the discard, right? All it takes is one card that says whenever you would have to discard a card, draw a card instead. Whenever you would have to discard a card, you may heal 1 damage instead. Just something to divert that or whatever. Or I think other people were talking about it in our Discord about getting around ward in some fashion. Even just making like 1 ping damage cheaper, right? Like, yeah, I think there's other options than necessarily outright banning the card, or any card for that matter.
Yeah, and circling back to Tug of War earlier, we saw a card today revealed that deals damage strictly to evasive characters, right? So what's to say that in set 5 they're not going to have a similar card like that for warded characters or something? So there's hope around the corner that maybe in the cards that aren't revealed yet, there's going to be more answers for Bucky. But right now he's going to stay where he's at until those answers are there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not on the bandwagon. I think of any card yet. That doesn't mean there aren't villains. And Bucky is certainly a villain to discuss. But I just think there just aren't enough cards, in the pool. We talked about this. There are less than 1,000. 816, just for those who are keeping tabs. Is right. The game is still young. If we're a year from now, we're looking down set 8 and we're still having problems. Like, I do worry about a little bit of the design space around Bucky when it comes to Floodborns. Like, how is that going to impact future sets? But, I'm confident there will be answers and there'll be limited stuff. Like, I think if we were seeing, and we're not going to get into the huge meta discussion this week as we're going to talk about the set championships coming up, but is if Green Steel or Emerald in particular, Green Deck was the only thing in the meta right now, I think maybe my opinion would change. But we're seeing still a pretty diverse meta. Not nearly as diverse as it was in set 3, but we're seeing a very pretty stable meta. And so I think, the game's healthy. Green Steel isn't winning every tournament out there, and plenty of times that Bucky isn't doing it.
And the fact that Emerald is even there is a good thing, because for the first couple sets, all the big tournaments, Emerald really didn't have a presence at all. So as more and more sets come out, Emerald has become, as clearly right now the deck that everybody's the reason why we're talking about Bucky right now. But I like seeing that. I feel like, of course, they had the sets planned out ahead of time, but the fact that it's changed so much from Steel Song and Ruby Amethyst. Ruby Amethyst has stayed pretty consistent for the most part, but like it's been pretty diverse, and the fact that Emerald has its place now when it didn't used to have a place up there at all is really cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if we cut it down to like 5 colors maybe, and got rid of them. I know other people have the opinion, but of this, but like discarding in general kind of sucks.
Yeah. So coming soon is Emerald, the villain of the week.
I just enjoy making decisions, and being rewarded or punished for those decision making. And when you discard my hand down to nothing, I'm no longer making those decisions anymore. And it's just like,
yeah, it doesn't feel.
Do you want to just play the Illumineers quest against my deck? Maybe like, go ahead. I'll go grab a stack. It's
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Emerald, the discard, at least angle that Emerald is definitely trying to do. But yeah, I mean, I think Bucky is definitely a card we're going to have to keep an eye on. And that is our first villain of the week. When we're going to move on to talk about our final segment this week, which is set championships, which, we're doing it a new format this time around. So last time for the Into the Inklands, it was 1 week set over 2 weekends, and you could have it over the week. Ravensburger has changed it this time that we're going to do it over 4 weekends, and it can only be done on Saturday and Sunday. So first, like, any first impressions about how this new format? What do you all think of that?
It makes me wonder why the shipping delays happened again. Now that I remember that, yeah, the last one was only 2 weeks, so everybody had their product before it was scheduled. They knew when they were going to be having it I think it was the last couple weeks of a month, but yeah, they had a whole month knowing that every weekend was probably going to be booked by the local game stores. We have so many overlapping here because we're fortunate enough to have so many local game stores here in the St. Louis and Illinois area, but the fact it makes it even more of a bummer that the product might not make it here in time for at least the beginning couple weeks, So I do like that it's spaced out. It gives more people, more stores the openness of having more people visit the store than having to worry about 6 other stores being scheduled at the same time as them, right? So it does bring foot traffic in, and it very much shows that Ravensburger cares about the stores and wants people playing in person, getting people in there, buying product, having fun. So I think overall it's a net plus to have multiple weekends, but the problem is it's also July, in the middle of summer when everybody has plans, so it's hard. I'm only going to get to play at least 1 weekend, 1 full weekend, and if I'm lucky, I'll get to play 2. And then again, they have the Dallas during one of those weekends too. So a lot of the players have committed to that and going to be out of town for it. So it's ups and downs, but I think having multiple weekends is a net positive for the community.
Yeah, well, and Bochum too. So Bochum is this first weekend. So there are 2 DLCs over it. Andy?
Yeah, I like the idea that it's spread out more. It's kind of weird because I do really enjoy the competitive side of it, but I really think that these set championships are kind of, I think Ravensburger is aiming for these to be an end of the league event for each store. You have your league, you do what you do, and then this is the sort of big finale at the end of the set. And so I'm curious to see how it morphs perhaps more into that. And I think spreading it out over the entire month, giving them every weekend of the month, improves that, right? If you have this small tight knit community, there's a couple of stores around the St. Louis area that do, you know, relatively tight knit groups. I think there's even one that does entirely invite only, and they only have room for like the 16 people that show up to their league every Thursday or whatever. And you know, I think having every weekend available means that those people can find a weekend that works great for them. Like you said, it spreads it out. I don't know how it feels for the competitiveness of it. Takes a lot of. I did 6 last time, and it was crammed into 2 weeks. This time, I'm gonna try and do 7 of them out of the 8 days available. But it feels like it's gonna take a lot more of my time, right? It's literally every weekend of the entire month. Whereas before it was just like a couple long weeknights and a couple weekends in a row.
Yeah, what are you talking about though, Andy? Your only limitation in not playing the game is your wife, right? She's the only one that's stopping you from playing every day.
Yeah, it'd be nice to play every day. I do have a concert to go to on the first event. I'm really disappointed. I'm missing one of my favorite stores. Their event. I think Brad, you're missing it as well.
Yep.
Is
Unfortunately. And
big
to speak,
unfortunate. And then
yeah, to speak to your opinion about that, I've come around on it a little bit. I when the first set championship happened, I was of the mindset that these are for the people who are regular leaguers, and for the most part, the regular leaguers still show up. But I was worried about a lot of out of towners coming and just swooping in and taking everything away. But after the success of them all, the 3 that I played in for the Stitch championship. I found that the people who did come in from out of town came in because we are fortunate to have as many places as we do have to play. Well, they only have one, so to give people, go back to the intro, why Vince calls me the mayor, or why that stuck, is because I played at 3 or 4 different places almost regularly for a little while, and then he made a comment in our local Discord about, the mayor of Lorcana had to appease his constituents, and then everybody thought that just stuck immediately. So anybody wondering why he called me the mayor at the intro, that is why. But because of that, I was fortunate to play in their what I thought was like league championships, as Andy said, but. Over time, it's more so along the lines. I think it's very evident that Ravensburger is trying to just increase business, get foot traffic into all these stores, and keep them, keep supporting them for supporting Ravensburger by having the game. So I see both sides of it, but at the same time, I'm just happy that these stores get to have these kind of events, and if I'm lucky, get to play in them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Andy, that it's definitely a end of set, thing that they're trying to do here. But I don't think these are meant just for leagues, right? Like, you can obviously, they have in the rules to do this, but I do think Ravensburger is trying to, at the grassroots, if you will, in these local stores, build competitive networks, and that ultimately lead up from the set championships to more competitive and the DLC, and will ultimately, be more competitive at nationals and more competitive at worlds, which we know nothing about nationals or worlds at this time. We've got people that have qualified at DLCs for worlds, but I mean for nationals, and we don't even know where or when nationals is going to be. We know nothing about it. But I think the only thing that I'm a little, I guess maybe I'm not as sure of is just them hosting it on the weekends. It's like, I mean, it's great for somebody like me who can, works a regular, Monday through Friday job, but like a lot of people don't have that luxury. Like they go to a game store on a Wednesday night or a Tuesday night because they've got no other ability to go. And so I wonder if this limits their ability to play. And also, like, game stores are busy. Like, Saturdays and Sundays are some of the busiest nights of game stores. A lot of people have other leagues, and space can be limited in these. And so you're adding that on top of it and stuff, and I think giving flexibility to stores to be able to run this. Like, I know you two both did events in the last set championship that were done during the week. One of the stores I think we regularly played at did it during the week, and yeah, it was a long night, but it got great turnout. It's like that store doesn't get that type of turnout on a
And
Thursday.
Andy won his first stitch that night.
He
Let's
did win his first
go.
stitch.
I was out till midnight the first stitch on a Thursday, and then the very next night I went out and won another stitch first place, and I was out till 1:30 in the morning that time. So
At least it's Friday though. But
Thursday, Friday, like I get it. I think a lot of it comes down to that distinction, right? Is Ravensburger trying to make the set champions be some sort of competitive bridge between local leagues and DLCs? Or is it meant to be a celebration of the people who have supported their LGSs and gone through the league system for that set, so to speak?
Yeah. For me, my view is this is porque no los dos. I'm sure Spanish speakers are like screaming at me right now. My Spanish Duolingo, I'm on quite a streak, but as an aside, but yeah, I think why not both, right? Like, I think it can be a little bit of A, a little bit of B. I'm just glad they do it, and I'm glad that they put really good pricing behind it. I mean, I think we're all a little bit shocked by how much the stitches are worth. And I mean, mine isn't my binder. I'm not gonna sell it, but because it was a super achievement and going into my first competitive event and getting it, like, I'm hopefully I'm able to get one going into these set championships. I'm not entirely 100% sold on what I'm going to play yet, which we're going to kind of segue into now. So I think, like, maybe we can just spend a few more minutes talking about, like, what we expect the meta to look like, at least going into the first 2 weekends here, and to expect, and like what we're thinking about playing ourselves.
I expect to see Bucky. That's why we talked about him tonight. Emerald Steel, I think, is going to be a huge one, and that's why I'm going to stick to Blue Steel to try to outrun that discard and get rid of that squirrel and dime my way to 20 lore. What do you play, Andy?
I'm probably gonna play red blue. I feel pretty confident on that. I got a little bit more testing to do. I do feel like we're going to see like a meta shift in the middle. I mean, we saw last set championships that between the beginning and the end of set championships, I distinctively saw a change in what decks were being played. I personally switched decks, right? I think there was a lot more red blue at the start of that. I think there were even some like yellow steel at the beginning of that, and I think it heavily switched to ruby amethyst as being very popular in that, and green purple becoming incredibly popular. I think we're going to see the same sort of thing. I don't know what my prediction necessarily is, but I feel like what you go into week 1 and maybe week 2 of set championships, you're going to see a lot of, like you said, maybe Bucky and green steel. I would love for Bucky to fall out of favor. Love for maybe week 3 of set championships to come around, go in with my 4x brawls, and then like see no green steel and be like, can I actually go down to 3 or 2 for week 4 in set championships? Oh man, that'd be the dream. But I do think because of a lack of um, a lack of a digital client for Disney Lorcana, the speed at which the meta is sort of developing, I think we're going to see probably an interesting shift between sort of the beginning half and the second half of set championships.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I think I'm anticipating, green steel to be there. I mean, I will say the deck does cost $800. But what I have found, I think that is unique about Lorcana versus maybe other TCGs. And again, I'm not an expert in any other TCG, not even an expert in Lorcana. I'm just a dude with a microphone. And it's that folks are like doing both. They're collecting and they're, playing, and they're addicted to the pack buying, because I know I am. I know all three of us are. And so, we're spending these monies because we want to like play the Diablo or Enchanted lottery. And we're getting these decks put together. So, I think a lot of folks actually do have these cards that maybe you wouldn't expect in other TCGs, where people are just, going to buy the cards they need to play. And obviously, I think that still happens in Lorcana, but I think to a less extent for the folks that are showing up to these tournaments. But then you've got the totally other end of the spectrum. You got what I think I'm going to go into this first weekend, which is Ruby Amethyst, which I do not feel confident on at all. I think it has some bad matchups, particularly going against Green Steel is one of its worst matchups. But I think like I can go 1-1 in the blue steel and the red blue matchup, even 2-0 in the red blue matchup, which was kind of an impossible situation to be in set 3 with that deck. But I think as far as like what I expect to see, like I expect to see Ruby Amethyst, I expect to see blue steel, I expect to see green steel, I expect to see some aggro decks, so I expect to see some green purple, which I think I think it has bad matchups. I don't think it's the best deck. It's not the deck I would recommend anybody bring to set championship, but I think it could pull out some wins. I played today a deck, the purple
Purple steel?
No, the one that Spessy did, it looks
The
really
Spessy,
cool.
yeah, the Spessy
I think
special.
that deck will be out there too. I think we'll see folks play that.
I mean, how many green steel did you see in Stitch set championships? That's largely Spessy influenced as well. I mean, I think it was a 10K over in Europe or whatever that Spessy was in, and the like ink decks like deck list, the name of the deck is Spessy told me like not to run 2 sad beasts in my green steel deck, so I did it anyway and I beat him or something like that. That was like the name of his deck in the on ink decks or whatever. So he definitely has an influence, and we've seen a dip, so to speak, in Lorcana content as everyone sort of figures out the best way to produce Lorcana content. And Spessy, I think, is doing a really good job of it, and so he has a great influence. And not just him, like other creators and stuff. I think you're going to see that they'll have a bigger influence than you might think. So you gotta keep an eye out for those sorts of wild card decks.
I think that's right. The deck that I was going to say was the purple amber deck, the hyper aggro, which
bad
I
memories.
think lemon lime you would see more likely.
That was something I was going to bring up. Yeah, in the Stitch tournament, when you were talking about decks you were thinking you would see, I was like, maybe start thinking about what you don't expect to see, because I ran into a lemon lime aggro deck at the Stitch Championship at one of the stores, and I just had no answer to. I was playing red blue at the time, and that's a slow starting deck, and when they bring out the Simbas and the Baloos and all this stuff to protect their little aggro questers, I got to get to Maui, and even then, I got to get through your bodyguards first, and you're just going to keep questing, and it just ate me alive.
Yeah, and with that blue, even if you get it off the board, they gain 2 lore.
Still gets 2 lore.
And so that's such a hard.
I got farmed by lemon lime hyper aggro as well.
Yeah.
in the top 4 match during
You know,
state championships.
I think my biggest advice for folks, though, and it's what I did in the set championships for into the Inklands, is running the deck that I was most comfortable with.
Yeah,
It may not have
always.
been the best deck, but it was the deck that I knew. And like as Andy talked about at the beginning of this podcast, is like knowing your outs. One of the things I think, a lot of creators have said, particularly I think the Podcana folks have talked about, is how Lorcana is a lot like chess. And I think that is actually a pretty apt analogy, which is like understanding like what your play lines are. Like what are you trying to achieve in any given matchup? And understanding like what your outs are. And what an out is for you, like it may not be perfect. It may not work, but you've got to play to like, okay, it's like if they're going to be prepared on 7, like what, like, how do I set myself up? Do I play like for Ruby Amethyst player? Maybe I put Rabbit down so I can get that extra card draw. So it's like I basically have them a penalty for them to play there, be prepared, so I'm getting some value back on that card. Or maybe it's a goat, right, to get that extra lore off of be prepared, or whatever it is. I'm just giving examples, I think, from a Ruby Amethyst perspective, and those may not be the best outs in any given matchup, but is understanding like what is it that can do to win this game in the most ideal circumstances, and knowing that maybe it won't work because my opponent can play Grab Your Swords. They can play, a whole new world to force me to throw away, the last remaining 2 be prepareds in my hand, or whatever it is, and just playing to those. And that's why it's, I think, much more important about then like what deck you're playing, that you know how to play your deck. And I can say no more than like looking at what happened in Atlanta when I think like Josh Paul's name is like Joshua Paul like plays this Amber Amethyst deck, and granted like been working on it for a long time, homebrew deck, but like knew that deck and came in and did that. And I think folks can do that with a lot of decks. If you know your deck well, you're going to be set up for success.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal we're all going for. The guy who won Atlanta, he sat down, and Atlanta, the meta at that point was so quote unquote solved. He was able to compartmentalize all of the likely scenarios that he was going to see. These decks, what are they doing on turn 1, 2, 3, 4? Okay, what is the best possible thing I can do in response to or in preparation for 1, 2, 3, 4 these things that they're going to do? And how can I find a card that is going to fit as many of these scenarios as possible? I think some people may be intimidated by deck building, but I like to call it deck tweaking. And I think it's easier than most people think. I think you take the deck that you're comfortable with, like Vince is talking about, and you sit down and you just logic through which matchups you're going against. What are they doing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is it that you lose to every time you play this matchup? Why am I losing against green steel? Why am I losing against blue steel? What is it they're doing? And then you just look at the cards and you think to yourself, which of these would help me in that scenario? And then you just have to, and you compound it with, okay, well, what about all the other scenarios we have? Does this card help me in more than one of those scenarios? Does it help me in 3, 4, 5 of those scenarios? And you put a card or 2 in there, you test them out, and you play to what your local scene is. That kind of goes back to the end of the year league set championship. If you frequent these stores ahead of time and you play in their leagues regularly, you're going to know Vince already knows what that person from his locals is playing. It's green steel. and they can count that in their book, and they can go, well, I'm playing against one of those on Saturday or whatever, so it's it helps you prep for that a little better.
Yeah, Brad, any other last thoughts?
No, I agree with all of that. I'm very much a person of play what you're comfortable with. Get a lot of reps in, know what you're looking for, and understand how to play on the draw, how to play on the on the play. Yeah, excuse me, and just play enough reps to like as Andy was alluding to. Joshua and in Atlanta knew what he was going to be up against, and he prepped by knowing, okay, in this situation against a Ruby Amethyst deck, this deck can do this. Against a Ruby Sapphire deck, this deck can do this, because it's just going. While Ruby Sapphire is ramping up, he knows that his Perditas are going to bring out all those 2 costs that he's throwing away. That are getting discarded from the Be Prepareds, and it was just incredible to watch. When I saw that there was a Amber Amethyst in the top 64 even, I never expected it to be that deck, and that was what was so incredible about it. And he was comfortable playing it, and it showed as he took it all the way to the top spot. So play what you're comfortable with and make tweaks, like Andy said.
Yeah.
True masterclass in deck building and piloting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's and honestly, like the last thing I'd say is just go in to have fun, right? That's what this game is about. It's going to have fun, and you're not going to win every game. Sometimes you go to an event, you're going to have a lot of great luck, and you're going to be playing at the top of your game, and the next you're going to have bad matchups. Some of this is not only like what deck you bring and being really good at it, but it is also luck on what matchups you go against too. And you could be unlucky and have unfavorable matchups, and that's okay. You just learn to roll with those, take those lessons, think about your deck a little bit differently, maybe how you can play that deck a little bit differently, and go on to the next one. And again, above all, just have fun.
Definitely. And I think we'll have to check back in, if not just next week during the podcast, but also maybe some extra content here to try and keep everyone up to date on how well our theories are actually holding up in these said championships. Maybe you don't tune in the next week if we all just go 0-5 and scrub out in every one of our events. We want to keep it a full stack with you.
Yeah, selling all my Lorcana cards after this weekend. No, but yeah, I think that's a good note to end on there. So, well, thank you all for tuning in to this week's Rules of Villainy, a Lorcana podcast. We went a little long this week because we had a lot of news to cover. But as always, remember the Rules of Villainy. We will see you next week.